All right, happy Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. So fun to see so many familiar faces. Jan, how are you doing? This is, so fun to kick off the weekend and kick off the Friday with this kind of thing, which we say this pretty much every time, but it's always a surprise, and it should be expected, I guess, 3 years in, but it still is always a surprise that this many people want to kick off their Fridays in a city like LA where you could do anything with something like a philosophy hang and conversation. And then it's also not too surprising because, I mean, especially in the last year or two, I feel like the world is getting weirder faster. And in that kind of dizzying disorientation, like any, a ballet dancer, you find a still point to orient yourself in the midst of the chaos or the dizzying nature of things. And a still point for humanity oftentimes ends up being these timeless ideals. It doesn't matter the tradition, but these timeless ideals, they have lasted this long because they are quite orienting. So with that notion, and then also brought a handful of books I'll touch on at the end that people can buy. People are already buying a couple as we were walking in, so I'm already lighter than when I started, but brought a handful that I thought would be enough, but I think we only have like 5 left on this philosophy that we'll talk about today. But real quick, just kicking it off, I'll hand the mic over to Reva. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing very well. Very well. Always excited for these monthly hangs. It really is a highlight of the month. And I have been thinking a lot about how the world's changing, just seeing some of the things in the business world, obviously the geopolitical world. But one of the things I think about a lot is how grateful I am to have this philosophy in my life and how grounding and orienting it could be. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, this was funny to me earlier in the week, but one of the few rituals of Vedanta is studying and reflecting early in the morning. This idea of Brahma Muhurta, which is 4 to 6 a.m. or even early, 3:30 a.m., and opening up the Gita, watching a lecture. And you get into pretty deep concepts very quickly. And I was kind of laughing to myself. Like, I get out of bed, go to the couch, and open the Gita and start reading the verse. And the first thing is like, the world is an illusion. Nothing exists as it perceives. You are not the body, mind, and intellect. It's like, damn, I haven't even had my coffee yet, right? I'm like trying to absorb these things. And then...
Dude, same for... let's see a lot of familiar faces. I see some new faces too. I'm sure they're like, dude, we're like 6 minutes in. What the hell did I just sign up for?
I was going to say this at the end, but I'm like, since you brought it up, the world's getting so crazy. So a question that I wanted to ask you is, so you study these deep concepts, and it's like so... amazing because it really feels like it grounds you. You're also trying to make sense of it at the same time because there's so much subtlety and richness to it. Then you close the book, maybe you make yourself a cup of coffee, and then you do the next thing, whether it's open up your laptop to send an email, you're sitting in the studio writing a song, you're packing kids' lunch, and you just go about your day-to-day life. So the question I have for you is, how do you transition from this morning reflection or studying this philosophy, which is so deep, and then applying it to the minute-by-minute life you're living that same day?
I don't know how someone doesn't. I truly have no idea how, and my wife and I were from Texas, and so are you. Reva's from Houston, I'm from Dallas, and we've been doing these for 3 years now. And I've been studying for over a decade this philosophy every morning. And one of the things that my wife and I have said to each other recently is, how do you not ground yourself in something timeless, something that has lasted longer than any other human ideas, any human empires, any human business, any culture? How do you not ground yourself in, and again, it's, we say it every time, it could be Socrates, it could be the Gospels, it could be truly, I mean, anything. It could be reading Platonic philosophy, but I really don't know how you can orient your life when you're making it up on the fly. And a friend of mine, he said that. So the two things that come to mind are within this philosophy. It said that nothing matters outside of what you do from 4 to 6 a.m., which is so wild. And by the way, I know some people might be here for the first time, and so they're still like, what the hell are they talking about? And we will get to it. This is like a Tarantino movie where it's like the end, then we'll have some of the beginning, and then back to the end, and then have some in the beginning. And by the end of it, it all makes sense, and it should synthesize. But that's the first thing that comes to mind is when I think about the making lunch, when I think about making breakfast for our daughters, when I think about work, email, a work roller coaster over a few weeks of, is this deal going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And I think about all of the dynamism of life. I just go back to, nothing matters outside of what you do from 4 to 6 a.m. Meaning, and that's a bit extreme because many things matter outside of that time. But it's like if you are staticky like crazy, and you just have so much static in your mind, literally maybe on your body, in your life, in your relationships, in your work goals, even trying to figure out what your goals should be, if you have so much static, nothing really matters outside of like, go touch the grounding wire. Touch the grounding wire. Whoa, that solves so much. You could choose not to touch the grounding wire, where you're like, nope, I'm just going to keep working through all this static, and every thought is like 3 thoughts at once, and I can't stay focused, and I say the wrong things, and then that creates, anybody knows you say the wrong thing in like a relationship. You say a thing that you're like, I shouldn't say this, but fuck it, I'm going to say it. You don't. And then you see it coming out of your mouth, and then you're like, I just created 5 hours of work for myself. I let that slip for 6 seconds, and now I know I'm going to have 5 hours, if not, sometimes 5 days of pain that I just created for myself from that static. And so the static leads to more static, and leads to more static, and then you're overwhelmed, and then you can't handle that situation well, and then you create more work over there, and then you're overwhelmed with that, and then it creates more static over here. Nothing matters outside of what you do from 4 to 6 a.m. is a way of pointing to that grounding wire allows the static to get released, that morning time and the timeless, as we often say. That allows you to think through that meeting at 9 a.m. You get to like 6:30, 7, and it's ideally before the sun comes up because it is seen within this philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, which is the philosophy that is kind of the container for this space in these conversations each month, but it really is a space for any philosophical concepts. Kant or Socrates or Aristotle, all of these different thinkers come up quite often in these conversations. But grounding in the timeless, I think, is the way to just resolve a lot of that static so you can act with clarity of what lunch am I going to make for our daughters? Mm-hmm. What conversation am I going to have or not have to start their day? So that's one of the two things that comes to mind. And then the other one is this conversation I had with my friend about a year ago. I think I mentioned it in one of our hangs, that he said, but aren't we meant to come up with our own philosophy? And as he said that, I think maybe like 25-year-old James, I would have been like, yeah, we're all different. We need to come up with our own kind of guiding light. And when he said that about a year ago, I almost had like a recoil of like, whoa, that's a big gamble to come up with your own philosophy. Everyone is different, and everyone will be wired for this philosophy. It says 1 in 10,000 will find it interesting. So not that many people are going to find this philosophy interesting or this approach to life interesting. There are as many paths to the divine as there are people on earth, according to this philosophy. But when he said, like, come up with your own, I was like, that's like being like, I'm going to build a 70-story building, and I'm just going to fucking wing it. Like, I like this stuff, and I like this stuff, and not to build on the shoulders of people that have come before. and come up with your own way of building a 70-story building. That's a way of doing it, but you might kill yourself, your family, and all the people and collateral damage vicinity by just trying to wing it. But at the same time, I told him, I was like, his name's Jason. I was like, if you feel a call towards that, go for it, because maybe it works out.
It almost serves as this higher level universal framework that, this concept of the auto server mechanism. And it's in psycho-cybernetics, but it's kind of like a camera that autofocuses. The way it works, it's constantly kind of iterating and iterating to find the focus. I almost see this philosophy like that if you really commit to doing the study and the reflection in the morning, you can trust that process to govern your actions for the rest of the day. If you don't, the virus of attachment, all these attachments to the world, you kind of lose that clarity, as you said, the static. But if you trust it, it almost takes care of itself. It's one way of thinking about it.
It is, it's self-healing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like, oh, there's that issue I've been not looking directly at. Mm-hmm. And now I have the clarity to see how destructive it is to not look at it, mm-hmm. which then gives you the clarity to look at it, which then gives you the clarity to know, I should probably do something about this.
Right.
And then it resolves that static, and then now you're like, wow, now I have this this bandwidth to focus on this other area. And this philosophy is, it goes back to these 4 philosophical textbooks called the Vedas, oldest philosophical textbooks in the world. And Vedanta just means end of the Vedas, because that's where the crystallized philosophical portion of the Vedas sits, is at the end of these 4 texts called the Vedas. And in terms of continuous study, it is the oldest philosophy on the planet, the source of nearly all Eastern philosophy, and I'd argue maybe all philosophy, because it's so related to, in fact, one of the Vedas say, truth is one. In the Rig Veda, it's famous quote of, truth is one, sages called by many names. And if it's the truth, it's going to show up everywhere. Whatever name you kind of splash on it, whatever language the local geography is going to use, it's going to point to, you call North in English. North exists in basically every language that has cardinal directions. So you call it by different names, but it's still going to be an orienting truth, if it is the truth. And you don't have to study any of these timeless. Another word for Vedanta is Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal principles. So it's about 25, 26 different principles. And they'll come up pretty often within this philosophy. Like, one of them is nothing matters outside of what you do from 4 to 6 a.m. It doesn't mean you need to study for 2 hours, but at least 15 minutes with your cup of coffee in the morning before you decide, all right, this is my goal for today, or these are the things that I'm going to do towards my goals for today. And it is so grounding, orienting, but because they are timeless principles, man, they help with the times we're in. Like, one of them being philosophy is clarity. Like, it's philosophia, quite literally in Greek to English, means love of wisdom. But wisdom, another knowledge bomb or principle within this philosophy, wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. So this philosophy, what we'll chat about today, what we chat about every first Friday, is just a list of these principles. And man, they are so clarifying. But the best part is that if it's the truth, like a North Star, or like north on your compass, it's going to get you where you want to go, or it won't. If it doesn't, then toss it aside. It's not the truth. It's going to be misleading. I'd recommend for anybody that's like, man, I'm not a night owl, or I'm a night owl. I don't get up early in the morning. Just try 7:30, 8:30, 7, 6:30, whatever you can. Start a orientation of your day of like, all right, 15 minutes, something timeless. It could be 2 pages of, this is our favorite book on this philosophy, Vedanta treatise. And it's just so plain English, no woo, just soup to nuts, the whole philosophy in like a 3-hour read. Really, really great. From our teacher who's 98 in India and spent 23 years writing this and never wrote a single word outside of 4 to 6 a.m. Imagine spending 5 years, 10 years, 15 years on a single book. much less 23 years, and refusing to write a single word outside of 4 to 6 a.m. So that's one of the remarkable aspects of this book, and the clarity within this book is, it, in terms of philosophical reads, unparalleled with anything I've ever come across. And the bar is actually pretty low with a lot of things that were paid per character publishing, with things like Hegel or Kant that just wrote endlessly because they were paid per character, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you read it the first 15 times. Versus this makes a whole lot of sense. You could spend two pages a day on something like this, or 2 pages a day with the Gospels, or the Quran. If it's lasted a long time, it's probably got some truth to it, and that is, it's so freaking nuts how helpful that is towards clarity, seeing the end in the beginning, which is again the definition of wisdom according to this philosophy. And then you start making these decisions where, like, yeah, I could not have found a better use for those 15 minutes, 20 minutes to start my day than in this stuff that maybe 15-year-old you would have been like, this is so abstract, esoteric. This is not the stuff that I need to be reading the trades. I need to go check the tech news if you work in tech, or I need to work on this project. And then, I don't know, you try those things, and then you're like, no, this is the best use of my time every single day.
The idea of your friend Jason's idea of personalized philosophy, it makes me think of, while these principles are universal, there is this concept in Vedanta of Svadharma. So one's true inner nature, which is unique to them. That's a composite of vasanas, your desires, which are accumulated from past lives. That shapes the characteristic that makes my personality, for example, different from yours, or different from yours. And if I think about Svadharma, aligning your purpose and mission to your true nature is such a key part of the philosophy. At the same time, I think about this adage, this classic debate of, can people change? And so I wanted to ask you, if you kind of reconcile these ideas, would you say Vedanta says that people can change?
Great question. And by the way, we've never actually talked about reincarnation before. I don't think, and we should, because there's the caricaturized, cartoonish version, and then there's the more sophisticated philosophical version. And I don't know, the 2 weeks that we spent on Eastern philosophy, and it was called Eastern religions back then, but they're much more closely related to philosophy than religions, in 8th grade in Texas. I don't know if you remember that, those 2 weeks. But we got the caricaturized version. But can people change? There's 2 planes, the relative and the absolute, according to this philosophy. And, take it or leave it. It's just concepts put forth that people can be like, no, that doesn't make sense to me. But this philosophy will say there's 2 planes: to perceive from, to talk about, to orient towards, but you got to know which plane you're talking from. The absolute is, there is only you. There is only capital S, self. There is only divinity. You can use a bunch of different words to point at it, and they're all just pointers, and they're never going to do it justice. And it is like talking about surfing versus the experience of surfing. But this philosophy is very explicit in that there's 2 planes of existence. And there is the absolute plane of, there's only you and the real you. Not Reva, not James, not Denise, not Jin. There's just the absolute. The divine, the infinite, Brahman, which means the vast, which is a Sanskrit word for the vast. From that perspective, no, you can't change. That's what you, according to this philosophy again, it's take it or leave it. That's what this philosophy says you are, you have always been, you will always be. In fact, Yahweh means that which is, was, and will always be. And again, when you start to find these little connection points, you see this philosophy everywhere. Yahweh was that which is, was, and will always be. And Judaism, by the way, is originally polytheistic. Yahweh was seen as like, that's Israel's God. We're going to orient to Yahweh. Yahweh is the most powerful. It's like regions of Greece would be like Apollo. That's our guy. Zeus, that's our guy. And so early Judaism was like, all right, Yahweh's our guy. Yahweh, the word for this God, is that which is, was, and will always be. Being itself. That is, I imagine you're seeing the similarities of Brahman, or God in this philosophy, is that which is, was, and will always be. Brahman, Sanskrit, this philosophy is all, the original language is all in Sanskrit and just means the vast, the infinite. And from that perspective, no, you can't change because that's what this philosophy, and by the way, I love that we are starting like in the deep, deep end of the pool. Because it is like, that is the deepest end. That is the end of this philosophy. That is the last page of this book, is this book saying, who you think you are is not who you are. Who you are is what is. So then you get to this other plane. It's like, well, what the hell is this? This experience where I feel like I'm 3 feet from another person on a stage. And this comes up every once in a while in our Philosophy Fridays. This concept of Maya, this ancient 5,000 plus year old, who knows how long the oral tradition was before the written tradition, but the written tradition 5,000 years ago, a very core piece of this philosophy, right before the end of the story, if the last page is, you are it. You are what is. Despite what we are told, despite what we think, despite what we're wired to think and reinforced 3,000 times a day, with the average American is subjected to over 3,000 advertisements a day telling each of us that you're incomplete until you get this, if you buy this. And if you're subjected to Magic Mind ads, then I apologize. We're part of the problem. You will not be complete until you have your Magic Mind each morning, though. These advertisements that tell us, like, this is what you need. That is the illusion, is that you're incomplete. Said in 3,000 different ways, said in 10 million different ways, said in the movie that you're watching that's like Jerry Maguire style, until you find that significant other, you're going to be incomplete. These messages hit us all the time. So no matter what mental fortitude we think we have, I mean, no matter what mental fortitude anybody has, you're subjected to that message 3,000 times a day. It's understandable that we're like, no, I'm not this divine thing. I'm just this tiny little speck. And I'm incomplete until I get, as the Buddhists say, until I get the 10,000 things. Once I get the 10,000 things, then I'll be complete. That's the relative plane that we operate on, where we think we are this individualized personality separate from the world. We see and perceive plurality, and at the base of it, this philosophy says there's just unity. But our perceptions tell us so loudly, no, that's idiotic. Unity, no, there's plurality everywhere. I'm separate. And this philosophy points to a very simple bridge between the two. And a simple example that we bring up whenever this concept of Maya comes up is the dream example. In the dream that you're having last night, 5 hours ago, there was perceived plurality, perceived separateness. There were other people. There were walls. There was gravity. There was clothing. There were shoes. There was drama. You didn't know what was about to happen. And you were creating it all. One of my favorite aspects of this philosophy, and really any philosophy that's worth a damn, is it points to our experiences instead of like, trust me, here's like some grand conceptual ideas that are fun to think about, but trust me. This philosophy is like, just look at your own experience. Every night we go to bed and we create worlds. All the time. And this philosophy is so, so freaking kick ass and how bold it is, where it's like, yeah, you're doing this right now. Like, and it doesn't mince words. It does not. It doesn't use kind of like allegory. It just says like, yeah, you're You are projecting an entire world with separate people, but it is all you. It is all you. In the dream, what is that table in the dream or the walls in the dream made of? You, not even ideas. It's made up of you. Fibers of your mind, projections of your mind. We use language to try to like articulate it, but even that falls flat. If it's those other people in the dream, they're you. And from the relative perspective, it's basically like masks on divinity. As Thoreau said, it's humanity is God playing the fool. And this perspective of, by the way, our perceptions, we use those as our arbiters of what's real, our sense perceptions. Well, this is real because I'm seeing it, and this is real because I'm feeling it. Every 24 hours, we're going to bed and feeling things, seeing things, hearing things that aren't real at all. So to wake up and then be like, well, that wasn't real, but shit, I know this is real because I can feel it, is so absurd. To just go from my sense perceptions have nothing to do with reality in this mode. 5 minutes later, I woke up. Now I know what's real because of my sense perceptions. And this philosophy just says, maybe not. And I think when you get to that relative perspective, it's very easy to change because it's just changing a mask. And it's changing your clothes. So changing the persona is actually quite easy to change. But it's like opening up a massive vault. Get these 4 numbers in a row, and it's so easy. Get the numbers out of sequence. Don't know the numbers. Use the wrong tool. Use the right tool in the wrong way. Try to use an axe. Yeah, it's really hard.
The relative versus absolute. So reality is only reality if it can exist in the past, present, and future. We are in the
reality is what persists. According to this philosophy, definition of reality is that which persists.
The way we define, maybe colloquially, reality in our illusory world, the earth, the way we say world, this came up at our last hang, which I found very interesting. Even though this may be an illusion and a projection, it doesn't mean that what you do as an individual every day doesn't matter. Correct?
I will say you can't mix the levels.
Okay.
And this is a canonical phrase within this philosophy of don't mix the levels. Because from the absolute perspective, it doesn't matter. Because it's not happening, which is insane. Which I get that is so insane. Like people ask Swami, our teacher is one of the most well-known proponents of this philosophy living today, and he's 98, by the way. If you ever want to go over to India and visit the ashram or visit him before he might not be here for too much longer. Now would be the time in the next year or two. I would highly recommend it, and no guarantee you even have a year or two. But people will ask about certain things, and someone might press for like, but Swami, what about the Big Bang? Like why would there be matter before there would be consciousness to experience? And if you press him enough, he'll just say, it never happened. And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, that's not an option. Like history had to have happened. And then you look back at an example of a dream. You're in the room, in the dream, you're like, oh, well, of course I'm in this room because I came from that other room. But history is just a projection. We're in this room because, we all parked or we walked here, we came from that other room. History, according to this philosophy and according to a handful of others, there is only the now. And so when we think about the past, that is just a further projection, just like in the dream where it makes total sense you're in this room. When you think about it, like I had a dream once that I was I was watching a movie, and I was like, wait, in the dream, I was like, it was a Ben Stiller movie. And in the dream, I was like, wait, I was at the premiere of this movie with Ben Stiller. And it was outside. We were like outside and like bunch of seats outside. It was really bright, and which makes no sense that you'd go to like a movie premiere outside. It was really bright. But I could have sworn, not even could have sworn, it was just, there was no swearing. It was just like, oh, I know, I was at the premiere of this movie. Well, with Ben Stiller. Wow, that's so cool. I don't know Ben Stiller. So it's all imaginary. But it was me recalling something, 100% certain it had happened. Then I woke up and I was like, whoa. Like that wasn't just a dream, it was a dream. And then I was projecting out the past. And that's what this philosophy says that we do. There is just this moment right now that you are creating, that you're projecting. Just like the dream, 100% certain it all makes sense, 100% certain this is happening. And Swami will say, everyone says, with regards to history, he'll say, it never happened. And this actually touches on, by the way, it's so funny, within this philosophy, people either want to talk about, they only want to talk about the illusion aspect of this philosophy, the matrix aspect of this philosophy. I saw a guy wearing a t-shirt that said, "The Matrix is a documentary." And there are people that just want to talk about the illusions, and then there's people that never want to talk about the illusions. They're like, the practical stuff, so helpful. Wisdom is the capacity to end in the beginning. Attach, you lose. Detach, you gain. Love is seeing no otherness in the world. They're like, that's the stuff that's really helpful. And it is. It's quite helpful. But they never want to talk about the illusions. Where they're like, that is too destabilizing. And there's a great sequence to kind of get to that perspective or that these conceptual ideas. There's a sequence, and it's also 1% of the conceptual framework of this philosophy, because it's not very practical. It is fascinating. I love talking about it. I love thinking about these aspects, but I will say it's like being in a dream and someone telling you, "Dude, this is a dream," and that might be factually correct. But if you are convinced with 100% certainty, no, it's not, this is all really happening, then it doesn't really matter that someone's telling you that it is a dream. So to answer your question, from the relative perspective, it matters very much. Right. How we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, how we approach our work. There might not be any actual traffic in the street, but I wouldn't recommend going and walking in the middle of traffic. Let's put it that way.
So there's this idea of serving the higher ideals in Vedanta. That's a really important concept. Also, the absolute ideal versus relative or limited ideals, which is related to what you're saying. The absolute one ideal is simply merging with Brahman, self-realization. Correct.
That's one way of saying it, discovering who you really are.
Discovering who you really are, which is the I'm on the self, which is one. You and I are the same. The rock on the ground is the same as myself. There's one self. That does not mean that relative limited ideals are not important. And so maybe talking about that, which that probably had the most profound practical change to the way I aspire to live life.
Give me an example.
Instead of having no North Star and kind of assuming what matters was conventional success or financial success or building a company, whatever you have, whatever it is, and just kind of floating around there, right? Like almost out of fear that if I don't do these things, who am I? Instead of being very intentional of, okay, maybe the absolute ideal is realizing the self, but knowing my level, what are the limited relative ideals I can set for myself that are aligned with my true nature? That makes sense.
Well, it's individual, And I think this gets back to, well, it honestly is just a progression of, it's as the amazingly wise words of Socrates go, if the unexamined life is not worth living.
Mm-hmm.
Know thyself. These are all the allegory of the cave, to transcend the shadows on the wall, ascend, see reality for what it is in all of its blinding disorientation, discovering who you truly are. These are all pointing to the exact same thing. And there is the absolute discover who you truly are, which, again, the leap might be too far for many of us to hear something like, you are what is. Even like conceptually, might be like, what the hell does that mean? Or idealistically, it's like, no. I can't be I can't be isness. Like, I am this small personality, and isness or divinity is this separate thing. And this discovering of who you are from the absolute is actually just as powerful from the practical and the relative. It is this beautiful through line that cuts through both levels. Discover who you truly are. Because discover who you truly are from the absolute, from the end of the story, and again, we are really dancing around the deepest end of the pool with this, with the beginning of this conversation. We're going to open up for Q&A with folks here in a few minutes too. It is the end of the story, and it's the very beginning. It might be 10 a.m. on a Friday in Venice, in a philosophy Friday hang, where two guys are up on stage talking about discovering who you truly are, and in your mind you're like, who am I? What should I be doing? There isn't a single person on the planet that hasn't asked, like, what should I be doing with my life? That's all part of the same equation of discovering who you truly are. You mentioned the principle of Svadharma within this philosophy, and there are these exotic Sanskrit terms, but the Svadharma, everything just has a very plain English translation for them. But what's very special about this philosophy, by the way, is that it's been preserved in its original language of Sanskrit. You have something like the Gospels, for example, that are, you have the Sermon on the Mount that's delivered in Aramaic by Christ, and then it's translated into Greek, then from there, translated, and much of it mistranslated from Greek into Latin, that now we know with, this is like common knowledge within historians. There are many parts that are mistranslated by St. Jerome from Greek into Latin. Then from Latin into Old French, then to French, then to Old English, then to English. That's 6 degrees where there can be mistakes. And we have no idea what the original Aramaic was. But this philosophy, for 5,000 years, preserved in its original language. So it sounds exotic, and I don't mean for it to be exotic, but it's a feature that these concepts are preserved in the original language, like Svadharma, which means your nature. Your nature being that finding your alignment, what you're wired for. It's often used in terms of professional pursuits. Finding what you're wired for. And the example that I always give is, it is like the albatross that can cruise up to 600 miles on a single flap of its wings. And Greg here shot me an email. I appreciate that email. He looked it up. He's like, I don't think they go 600 miles on a single flap of its wings. And then he's like, but it did say they can go up to 600 miles. So that's why I'm very precise. And I was like, Greg, I'm very precise in how I say it because I also don't want to mislead. But an albatross can go up to 600 miles on a single flap of its wings because of its preternatural understanding of wind directions, barometric pressure, the long-ass wingspan of an albatross, if you've ever seen one. It's a freakish wingspan. And they can go up to 600 miles near effortlessly. That is what we are all wired for when we align our work to what we are wired for, when we align our nature to nature itself. Because that's 600 miles of gliding on a single flap of its wing. 600 miles. That glide, that flow that animal's finding, that is not just reserved for albatrosses. That is for each, according to this philosophy, according to this timeless philosophy on orienting ourselves to the world around us. It's saying that that is nature, your nature. That is the most natural thing, is to find the thing you're wired for, where, that we say this in kind of modern language, find the thing that feels like play to you but is work to others. Find that thing that you're wired for. And it's a lot of work, perhaps, to find that thing. It's a lot of work for that albatross to learn how to fly. But imagine that exact same animal trying to paddle 600 miles. It might die going 17 miles, not even reaching a fraction of, barely reaching a fraction of what it could have done had it just succumbed, surrendered, realized its nature. So in discovering who you are, that is the through line that cuts from the practical to the absolute. But in that practical, it is the scaffolding that takes you to the highest of highest ideals, to that highest of discoveries. And it's the thing that can orient you to a dialogue in your head at 10 a.m. on a Friday in Venice. Discover who you truly are. That discovery, I will say, it's the unexamined life is not worth living. It is through a lot of examination, and it is through, inevitably, it is through an immense amount of surrendering. Of like, oh God, I think it's this thing over here. I might have felt that since I was like 6 or 7 or 8. I was just wired for that, like gravitational pull towards it. Did it for a while, or I did it for a little while, and then I like convinced myself, no, it's over here. And I don't know if I can make a living. I don't know what would happen if I did that. But Svadharma has this extra quality to it where it's your nature aligned with nature itself, but it is also Svadharma, your nature. It is also aligned with Dharma, which means truth, nature, law, all of these, all in one word, Dharma. If your Svadharma is to, the example I'll often give is to play music, but you're like, I can't wait to get 50,000 people chanting my name, singing my songs. That would not be the aligned version of your Svadharma. It would be, let me use what I'm wired for to get something from other people, and to use other people as instruments for what I want. Validation, admiration, financial milestones, whatever it is. True Svadharma is, I'm wired for playing music. This is my offering to my community. And it might be 15 people. It might be 23 people. And maybe it's 50,000. I'd say the effortless way to get to 50,000 is to have this surrender into, I have no idea how I'm going to make this work financially. I don't know how this is going to be a comfortable lifestyle. Maybe it's just the starving artist. But you will be so good at that craft. You will be so good that your community will be throwing everything you ever wanted at you to keep doing what you're doing because you are so good at it. One of the phrases that Prague part of the Venice Vedanta Club, part of Philosophy Fridays, will say is, he found this great definition of finding your Svadharma is, it's the thing you would do where the only reward is that you got to do more of it. What is that thing that you would do where the only reward is that you got to do more of it? That's part of discovering who you are. That's part of the crazy nuts and bolts of practical living on a Friday morning that takes you all the way up to the ideal of, oh my God, this is so energizing. The definition of right action in Vedanta is that which generates energy. Right. There are no shoulds, there are no should nots, there are no codes of conduct, there's no 10 commandments. It's just right action is that which generates energy. Wrong action is that which dissipates energy. So you'll align to that right action, which I know that you have found in your career, this chapter of your life versus the last one that we met under, and how life-giving, energy-generating it is when you live an aligned life and discover who you truly are, and kind of maybe go through a bit of surrender versus, I'm not going to look over there. I hear there's a call to adventure. There's a call to what I'm wired for, but no, I'm not going to look over there. I'm going to do this thing. Then I'll do that later. And man, that's a dissipating. That will dissipate your energy so fast, overwhelm you, and you'll be the albatross paddling 1.5 miles against the current, being like, why is everything so hard?
It seems so easy in concept to just say, let me be who I'm meant to be. If you really dissect what makes it hard then to play it back is the potential loss of some material gain. Let's say a typical career that conventionally earns more money. So that's one, maybe. And maybe the second is a fear of the unknown. You have a company that helps people find really what they're meant to do, which is exploding. I mean, we know from under the hood, Fair knows. And is that really what makes it so difficult, would you say? Because you're an expert in this. For someone to really lock into who they are. What are the particular factors or drivers that make it so difficult, even though you know, like secretly deep down, this is who I am?
And it is another way where this philosophy is so clarifying, or really any of the timeless philosophies are so clarifying. But this one gets explicit in saying your selfish desire is the obstacle. Is the obstacle for everything you ever wanted. Is that this philosophy will say what we really want is two things: peace and prosperity. I've never heard that called out before, by the way. Never heard explicitly stated like what we all want. We kind of get told things by some company will tell you it's this watch, it's this education, it's this job, it's this house. So they'll give you these symbols because they make commercial, I don't know, they take some economics off of getting you to want that thing. But this philosophy will say what we all want, the heart of all of these symbols of these things that we think we want, at the heart of it is you want peace and prosperity. And you don't want one or the other, you want both. You don't want just peace and then you're worried about paying rent. You don't want just prosperity and then your kids hate you. You're always worried about, I don't know, your community kicking you out of the community. You are stressed out of your mind because you got to keep you're on some treadmill. And so you want peace and prosperity. Not one or the other, but you want both. And that is there is a beautiful, there's so much clarity that just comes from knowing that you want both of these things, not one or the other. But it's there's an aspect to this philosophy that, and in any kind of deliberate approach to life, where you do these things that are deliberating, and then they become liberating. You recognize like, oh, selfish desire, or if that resonates with you, oh, my selfish desire, that's the obstacle for everything that I want. Because every time I like pursue something with huge amount of selfishness to it, I repel people. Everybody knows the really selfish coworker. Like everybody knows the really unselfish coworker. They are an absolute hero in the organization. The really unselfish friend. The community will never let that. Your friend group of 5, 6, 7 friends, the really unselfish one, you know that everybody loves that person the best. You'll never let that person go. Then you have like the really dramatic, selfish person. Drama is just like, dramatic is just another way of saying everything's about them. This is real selfish. And you're like, yeah, out of the 7 of us, we could probably let Jay go. He's kind of cool, but also really dramatic, really selfish. And then you have, and I always think of at Airbnb, Lenny was just this saint at Airbnb as a product manager. And he was so loved that then when he left Airbnb and started a newsletter for product management, and it was the same ethos, I'm just going to give all of my wisdom away, give all of my knowledge away, going to help people as much as possible. And it is the #1 revenue-driving newsletter on Substack in the world. And he was the most selfless person, most loved person at Airbnb, and did phenomenally well at Airbnb financially. But it was never about him. It was like when I say this, what goes through my mind is like 13 different examples where I'm like, God, I love talking about how selfless he was. Because it was so, or unselfish, because it was so beautiful. But that selfishness, the selfish coworker, repels people. Yeah. And like I said, we all kind of know that person. And their goals get further and further from that peace and prosperity gets further and further from them.
Two things to that. Has anyone followed the Afro Man thing that happened? Yeah.
No, well,
I learned about Vedanta through Afro Man. He was practicing. He was practicing it. He said that same exact thing. I don't. It's a little bit political, so I won't get into all the details. But basically, he's spending like a few $1 million of his own money, what he said, to counter something he believes in. Involves the police, but what he said is like, I have no problem spending this money because I know I put this out into the world. I'm gonna get 100 million back. Like the people will take care of me because this is how people feel, right? And he said it, even if it wasn't about the attachment to the 100 million, it wasn't that. I really feel like it was this Vedantic channeling, like I surrender to, I believe in this, I'm okay. Even if I lose the lawsuit, it's okay. And that really just made me think about what you're saying right now.
Surrender ends up becoming logical because you try it out, and that's truth is the truth, and it shows up everywhere. So with this philosophy, the single greatest aspect of this philosophy is you can try it out in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Where you're like, all right, I'm going to do the unselfish thing right now. See what energy it generates within you. Put it on your to-do list. Later today, I'm going to do something super selfish. I'm going to do this just for me. I'm going to ask for this just for me. See what it does with your energy. I'm not being facetious. Try it out and just see what happens. And it's like surfing, where people tell you it's so great, and then excuse me, you hear it's so great enough that maybe you go out and try it, and then you're like, oh my God, every single one of those people were right. It is unbelievable. That thrill, the being in the water, catching a first wave. Like you never have to. Once someone catches their first wave, you never have to tell them the great things about surfing ever again. They are done. They're cooked. They will be chasing that for the next 40 years because it is so just self-evident. Similarly with this philosophy, like I say this quite often, try out if any of these philosophical principles resonate with you today, just try one of them out. Wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. Okay, in this fork in the road, let me try to think through as far out as possible what is the right choice. And it works for you. You're like, whoa, that was actually so helpful. Or you hear like, this one's so good. Attach, you lose. Detach, you gain. Be really attached to some outcome. And see if that helps you. Try detachment to that outcome. Maybe you're single and you're pursuing something. The dating example is such a great one because we all know that example where many of us have been on both sides of it, of like too attached and you're like, I'm pushing them away, but I can't stop. I got to text them. And then we also know the opposite, where you detach and you're like, all right, my wife is a good example. After 2 weeks, I was like, I got to slow my roll. And then you detach, you give some distance. You're not attached to making this outcome happen. And then you're like, whoa, it's just kind of happening. That Svadharma concept of your nature and nature itself. There is this concept and to finish that thought, that is as simple as like, just think about what you were attracted to when you were 7 years old, 8 years old. What are the things you loved? Find 15 minutes to do it. Find an hour to do it. See if it generates energy within you. And then imagine that energy that's generated 15 minutes, an hour of just doing it, where the only reward is you got to do more of it. Imagine if that could take you to your 10,000 hours of mastery of that craft. And it'll take you well past that 10,000. Take you to 40,000. The commercial value you could demand by being such a master of that craft at 40,000 hours, that's undeniable. That's just logic. And maybe it's a little bit of surrender but in the beginning, but then it's just logic. It's like, well, this is the thing that I will still love doing 40 years from now. And it's going to propel me into a flow in my life and into my career, unlike anything else I could try to force myself to do. Or you've experimented with trying to force yourself to do other things, and those really drained you. And so it's maybe the greatest practical aspect of this philosophy is that it is self-evident, like catching the wave. Any of these concepts, try them out later today, and you will be able to see if they have any truth to them or not. I do want to touch on reincarnation real quick because we gave a teaser for that, and then we'll open up for Q&A from the audience. But there's the characterized version of reincarnation. And by the way, growing up in the West, I just thought reincarnation, that's insane. How could that be? You'd come back and have life after life after life. That makes no sense. And then as you kind of grow up and you start to examine life and examine one's own influences, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, I was like, I don't know, what's more insane? That you're a part of this just eternally rotating wheel of existence? Or that you have existence for eternity before, or 14 billion years ago. Now they're starting to see Big Bang probably wasn't 14 billion years ago. This guy, I think it's Penrose, the Nobel laureate, is now putting forth a theory that seems to have a lot of truth to it, that the Big Bang is just one of infinite numbers of Big Bangs, expansions, contractions, expansions, contractions. So either one of those, 14 billion or eternity before and eternity after, what's more interesting, strange, peculiar of an idea that you're just a part of this eternally existing existence and you're a part of it? Or nope, you have this tiny little blip for 19 years, 85 years, tiny little blip. Before, the eternity before, nope, no Reva. The eternity after, nope, no Reva. And this concept of reincarnation is, I never really cared for it in this philosophical kind of lens. Never really thought too much about it. But the sophisticated version of it, I still don't even think about it very often, but the sophisticated philosophical version is not that you were Sarah before, now you're Sally, and the next life you might be Elizabeth, and next life you might be a lizard. It's not that at all, because this philosophy, the end of the story is that you are what is, and you are all of it, as St. Paul said in Colossians. Christ is all, and all is in him. So Christ consciousness, you could say. Existence is all. You are what is, and there is no such thing separate from you as time. So there's no like, all right, 1972, one life ended, in 1973, your next life began. There is no independent train tracks of time that you come in and out of. You are all of it. And as we said before, this philosophy goes so far as to say there is no past, there is no future, there's just now, like the dream. And like the dream, there is no version of the dream you that was a baby that then got, breastfed, then bottle fed, then started to eat solid foods and makes its way to this classroom in high school that you're having some recurring dream of being in high school again. You're just, boom, in a moment. You created it. You're maintaining it. The moment will end. This philosophy hang, created, maintained, and it will end. Just like the dream, and it is a projection that there was anything before, there's a projection there's anything after, and this the sophisticated philosophical version of reincarnation is that you're doing this constantly, just creating situations, scenarios, worlds, and there's a creation, a destruction, or a creation, a maintenance, and destruction happening all the time, eternally. And each one, you feel like, well, this was a string of a million events before, and there's going to be a million events after, but that is just part of the projection. So the idea that you I don't know, if you act poorly and you come back as an animal, as a cow, and then you do things right and you come back as a human, or if you do things really right, each existence as a human, you progress towards more and more peace and more prosperity, assumes on a fundamental level that there's this thing called time that you're coming in and out of. And this philosophy says there is no duality. There is nothing besides you. So the sophisticated version of reincarnation is actually you're projecting it all, and it is like infinite big bangs of your projection over and over and over again. And it never happened. And it is not even happening. And the next version will have it might have no situational relationship to 2 legs, 2 arms, a humanoid type of existence, Los Angeles, Venice. And that is, again, that's deep into the pool. That's pretty out there. But it is very different than the version of reincarnation I thought of, like, you're going to come back baby, adolescent, young adult, geriatric adult. You die and then you come back as a baby. It's actually far more nuanced, far more strange, but also far more like the thing that we do every single night, which is dream. And you just birth the existence, maintain it, it dies out, you birth another one. It's that's the sophisticated version of reincarnation, which we've never talked about, but and it's a fascinating concept, but I don't know how practical it actually is. That's why I never really think about it. Okay, we'll open it up for questions. On that crazy out there note, we'll open it up for, audience Q&A.
Hi, very interesting talk. I had some questions about some of the references you made to Judaism. You were saying it's polytheistic.
No, it's not now, but it started.
I wanted to ask you about that because where are you referencing? Because the baseline of Judaism is Hero Israel, Adonai is God, Adonai is one, and that there is none else. The first Jew is Abraham, who as a child destroyed idolatries. There are mentions of other gods at the time, but the mentions of other gods are referring to idolatries in the ancient times that other people called gods. The whole baseline, it's the only thing that's uniformity in Judaism back into the earliest texts, that there is one God since the first Jew. It's the baseline of Judaism. So I was wondering where you're getting from. And my other question was,
Can we start with that question, and then we'll get to the next one? Can I just answer this one? So the choice of Yahweh as the soul.
what the word you just used is very important. So that word in Judaism is sacrilege to say out loud. And I was wondering why you chose to say it so freely. It's equivalent to drawing Muhammad's face. It's like we don't even say it in any Jewish text ever. And when we pray, we say Adonai, or if we say it spiritually, we say Adonai means ruler, or Hashem, which means the name. And I was curious why you're choosing to use that word, which is like very sacrilegious out loud in Jewish spaces when speaking about Judaism, that you're using it very freely. So I was curious what was the choice behind that.
I think the operative phrase you just gave is in Jewish spaces.
But like you're just using it talking about.
But we're not in a Jewish space, so I don't mean it to offend. And
I'm just curious why you made that choice.
well, since we're not in a Jewish space, and I don't mean to offend, using certain words to that just James speaking, think can help articulate something really powerful about the word Yahweh and what it means, which is so powerful. When I first heard that, that's why I used it, because I felt like it would be a powerful concept to reference as another tradition that has a really interesting rooting of this word that we don't. How many people have heard the word Yahweh in their life? And how many knew that it meant that which is, was, and will always be? So, yep, being itself, right? So that's why I brought it up. So that's this is historical accounts. I welcome anybody to use their favorite AI research tool. That this is based in history. That Yahweh. It's not from the text. I wouldn't be able to tell you the exact text that historians point to, but this part is not James, the speaker, making this up. This is actually a well-known historical fact, and it's not spoken about in many of the traditional sects of Judaism, but it is part of the history of Judaism. I think you'd have to consult. I'm not an expert, so you'd have to consult with your favorite AI chatbot if you want to know the specific text. But it stands historical fact, according to historians that study this, and I don't, that Yahweh comes from a prior polytheistic view that there were multiple gods. So, but great question. And I would love to encourage anybody to look it up on their own to see if Maybe I'm factually inaccurate, or maybe it actually does come from a polytheistic background. And then the other polytheistic deities were so vehemently denied that then they're scrubbed clean, if you want to get even more particular. But that's what historians put forth, not me. But good question. And right next to her, you had a question as well. Do you mind saying it one more time? Reva?
I was thinking of actually the philosophy directly addresses this, and if this resonates, let me know. If it doesn't, can try to follow up. But this idea of receipt of a stimuli, reaction, and response. So receipt, correct? We are exposed to all these different stimuli every hour of the day, especially now with technology, constantly, if we're on our phones. So that's the stimuli. We have an internal reaction, of which a lot of the times we cannot control. That is actually our mind. So there's this concept of the body, mind, and intellect. But that may be a feeling. Something makes you happy. Something makes you sad. Something makes you angry, especially nowadays. You can choose how to respond to that. So the energy you put back into the world, this philosophy, if you're studying it, I found it really helps you regulate that response. And that is a choice. That is the strengthening of the intellect over the mind. We all have a body, mind, and intellect. Your mind is equivalent to the heart, your feelings. Your intellect is thinking. If you're able to regulate, the whole idea of regulating your emotions is somewhat related, but if you are employing your intellect, you can have agency over that response. I think what's happening in modern times is there's either a belief or there's a weakening of that agency because the volume and intensity of stimuli is unprecedentedly high. So we have all these very strong reactions internally, and then our responses are just unadulterated, unfiltered, and then it's just a feedback loop on everything. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Receipt, reaction, response. Receipt. Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Yeah. It's and there's if anybody wants the 15-minute overview of this philosophy, you can find it in the opening episode of the Daily Vedantic, one of the podcasts that I put out there on this philosophy. 15-minute overview, the whole philosophy, beginning to end, soup to nuts, and it covers perhaps the central practical philosophical principle within Vedanta, which is we have a body, a mind, and an intellect to navigate through the world. The discovery of who we are, that is through the reflection each morning, that is through developing the intellect, and that is the development of the intellect. And by developing the intellect, that is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. That is the ability to look at any stimuli, any situation, receive it, have some reaction to it, or non-reaction, and then choose your response to it. And it is the difference between saying that thing in 6 seconds and creating 5 hours of work with a significant other or spouse, or not saying that thing that you know your higher self wouldn't say, and avoiding 5 hours of extra work. But yeah, question back there? I know that paradox well. It has to be real. And that is paradoxical. But it has to be real. It's like trying to fall asleep. Too attached to it. We all know that loop creates anxiety. That is the doom loop that makes it harder and harder to fall asleep. So it has to be real. You have to want to fall asleep, but you also have to recognize, if I want this too much, if I've got this attachment, I've got to get at least 6.5 hours because I got this big thing in the morning. Shit, now it's 5 hours. Oh my God. That doom loop is that anxiety that's making it harder and harder to fall asleep. It's very similar to this paradox. But what makes it much easier is to recognize that whatever you are seeking, and I'll say this quite often because it is so orienting, so powerful, and so simple. It's like bench pressing 500 pounds in that it's simple. It's not complicated, but it is not easy. But it is simple. And that's this principle within this philosophy that what you are pursuing, what you're chasing, what will complete you is not out there. And if you take anything away from this conversation today, let it be this. It's not out there. Where that becomes practically helpful is then when you're thinking through, okay, how do I detach from this so I can get this thing that I really want, that I'm attached to, but I know if I'm too attached, I'm going to push it away, so I'm going to detach and kind of look the other way and pull it my way, whether I side-eye and make sure it's coming my way. And that is a knot. An entire unnecessary entanglement, a knot tied around this idea that it's out there. And if I can get that, then I'll be complete. I'll get peace, prosperity. The thing that I'm chasing, it's right out there. It's that promotion. It's that significant other. It is that validation. It is the status. It is fame, whatever version of it is that it might be in your mind. It is the underlying illusion. The illusion of all illusions is, it's not that like, is this real or not? Wait, what the hell? It's not that. The illusion of all illusions is, it's out there. Then the right city, the right house, the right job, the right number of commas in a bank account. And this philosophy proposes an alternative. It says, what you are pursuing is not out there. Then that becomes incredibly powerful towards the detachment, to where it's like, get the promotion or don't, doesn't really matter. And again, this goes back to our experience. How many times have each of us in this room sworn to ourselves, if I just get into that college, if I just get her to text me back, if I just get him to pay attention to me, if I just get that promotion, if I just get this dream job, I cannot wait for that package to get here on Thursday. It's gonna fucking get here. It's gonna be awesome. How many times have you gotten that thing you swore would make you so happy? 48 hours went by and it's like it never even happened. So we know this. We know that it's not out there. And we tempt ourselves again and again. fall back in an illusion that it is. But once we start to whittle away at that illusion, start to overcome it, then it helps us to where it's like, hey, if I'm supposed to have that promotion, if I'm supposed to be with that person, if I'm supposed to get that house, that'll take care of itself. And then that person finds you a lot more intriguing. That promotion feels a lot more credible, legitimate. That house just comes your way. Yes? Deep sleep, yeah. Deep sleep, dream, and waking. Well, everybody goes through all three of those. So each of us go through, you wouldn't exist, I think biologically, if you didn't have any deep sleep. Some of us might not get as much as our bodies are craving, but deep sleep is conscious awareness, but objectless awareness. You're not aware of anything. You kind of wake up from deep sleep, and we all know that feeling of like, whoa, that was really deep, but you didn't experience anything. Then there's dreaming, where you're like, holy shit, that dream was wild, and where you were experiencing things that was that actually had objects to your awareness. And then there's waking, which is this elevated version of a dream. This experience here is described as an elevated version of a dream. There's more tactile perceptions, sense perceptions, perhaps. There is that these three are all part of the illusion. They're different islands of the illusion that you bounce around in during the course of a day. And the fourth Turiya, Turiya means Sanskrit for fourth, but that fourth plane, that is the absolute according to this philosophy. That absolute, you could call it Turiya, you could call it moksha, nirvana, liberation, self-realization, enlightenment. You can call it any of these. You can call it any of those things, but it's all pointing to the same thing. There is a correlation to, if you find yourself waking up 4:30, 5 pretty often, it is part of your natural wiring craving that time. Lean into your nature. Good question. Reva?
Ooh, yeah, it's so hard. If maybe a clarifying question, let's say something happens in the business, there's like a fire, the client's unhappy and threatening to leave. It's like a big part of your revenue, and you can't cover payroll next month if they leave. Is that like a good scenario to anchor to this of surrender versus like whatever happens versus like attaching to? That's just went through my head of like attaching to, I will dig my heels in, like not lose them. Yeah.
Invisible things like Schrodinger's cat, like things that exist that could be problems if you looked under the hood. But I guess both, because in life and business there are things you have to deal with face on immediately that you have to deal with.
Right.
Versus things that are unrealized issues.
Right. I think maybe this is just what goes through my head. I think what I've started to feel is that when you do surrender to the higher level order of, let's say, the mission of the business, there's always fires and problems in a business or in life. what happens is you may not necessarily solve that exact fire because you are attaching to something that's not that, but it ends up dissipating where I don't know why this quote from Harold and Kumar came up, but the guy in the jail is like, life tends to work out as it should. That's really how what I feel happens, and it's for the better. Where if you just surrender to, it's so difficult though, because like you want to dig in your heels and you want to solve the problem right in front of you, but if you just let it burn, I think that's such an important part of building startups. I mean, you have all the experience in the world of knowing what to prioritize, knowing what to let go. Even if you're not practicing this philosophy, is such a core part of it. You can't solve every little thing, right? It's like knowing where to apply your energy that's what comes to mind when I hear it.
Well, yeah, in Schrodinger's cat's a good example. By the way, Schrodinger studied this philosophy every day. His dog was named Atman, actually. I think the simplest thing I would say is the root of all frustration comes down to mismanaged expectation. Nearly all of our frustrations come down to mismanaged expectations, where we want Schrodinger's cat, we want the cat to be alive. We want the business to only have profits and no losses. And that's not, even from a practical sense, that's not reality. This world is described as opposites in this philosophy. The world is opposites. Like the world isn't described as like big blue marble with a pretty thin atmosphere that we walk around on. The world is described as opposites. Hot, cold, pleasure, pain, joy, sorrow, profits, losses. That is the world. That is this existence. It doesn't take us long to look around and be like, yeah, this is opposites. There's no life without death. Like it's everywhere. That is the biggest, loudest thing that's written on every wall that is on the other side of this life as a personality, as a body is, there's going to be a death. And we mismanage our expectations where we're like, no, it should only be life. There should only be good waves. There shouldn't be any bad waves. But I think when there is a proper assessment of what the world is, what a life is, the fact that there will be profits and losses. Business, there will be life and death in personal relationships. When there is a proper assessment, then it doesn't surprise you. And as Socrates so famously said, philosophy is preparation for death. And that's so powerful because he's not just saying life is preparation for your death. It's preparation for death all over the place. Death of a loved one, death of yourself, death of an idea, death of a business, death of your reputation, death of validation. It's preparation for all of that. And that becomes really, really valuable when you're prepared, when you have a solution to a problem, you don't have a problem. If you can lift 15 pounds because you've been preparing yourself for, I'm going to need to lift 15 pounds, you don't have a problem. You got the solution. When you're prepared for the big waves and that are the detrimental waves, the ones that hurt, when you're prepared, when you know, like, all right, I'm going surfing in 8-foot waves. These might blow me up. I better be prepared for it. Or you say, dude, I'm not prepared for 8-foot waves. I'm not going into 8-foot waves. Then you avoid them because of proper expectation or proper assessment. And in business, like, there are founders that are prepared and are built for, a 7-person company, and it's awesome. It's like those are their 5-foot waves. They're wired for those 5-foot waves. They'll love it. That same founder doesn't know their level. That's a great principle within this philosophy, by the way, is know your level. There's a founder same founder doesn't know their level, and they're like, let's go as big as possible. This is me in my 20s, by the way. Failure after failure after failure. It's like, let's go as big as possible. And they're like, I don't care how big it gets. They get past 7 people, and they don't prepare. They don't know how to manage 25 people, 45 people. This was me 10 years ago. And it's just like, let's surf in 50-foot waves because, man, everybody on the covers of the magazines, they're surfing 50-foot waves. Not prepared for it at all. And you not only get detonated, but then you spend like 18 months picking up the pieces. And so when it comes to like the waves that are coming at you or problems that are coming at you, there is equal parts preparation for the inevitabilities and also recognition of, and that part of like deconstruct the frustration by having properly managed expectations. But then lastly, knowing your level. Being like, I'm gonna avoid the 50-foot waves because I'm not really ready for those, and those could kill me if I am not careful. And then you don't have 50-foot. Like, Samir, have you ever had a 50-foot wave coming your way? Damn, I love that you had to even think about this. This is awesome. I know you grew up surfing, but have you ever had a 50-foot wave? Oh, metaphors. Okay. In real life, literally, have you ever? Because you probably avoided it. There are places you could put yourself in on the planet that would have had 50-foot waves, but you avoided them because you knew your level. So a lot of the issues we get in, a lot of the knots we tie ourselves into are because we don't know our level. We expect there's just going to be profits and no losses, and we put ourselves in Jaws, 50-foot wave. We had no idea how to surf a 50-foot wave. Sadly, that is inevitable for 99.9% of humanity because they don't know their level. We don't spend any time properly assessing and setting our proper expectations, and we just want to be whatever the metaphorical equivalent of riding 50. We just don't want to ride a 50-foot wave, and then we get detonated, and we spend 18 months being like, maybe I should learn before I try to ride waves like that. We got time for 2 more. Yeah, Mitch.
I was thinking about, I've never met Swami or been around someone in real life that I feel like is self-realized or close to self-realized, because it's a hard thing to specifically define. And we hear a lot about these characters in history, Christ or the Buddha or even Gandhi. But you both have met Swami, and I'm just curious, what is that experience like to be in the presence of someone who is, or how is it, in reference to other literature about what these experiences were like to be in the presence of these people, and what is their experience like as far as like how they relate to the world? Because they're still to us like human beings who have personalities or watch the Animal Planet or whatever those things are. But I'm just trying to understand like what is the nature of that individual compared to where we are and that journey of trying to become more like that. And just wanted to kind of from your experience.
Great question.
It's hard to separate like the anticipation of meeting.
And we are at time. If people need to go, feel free.
Anticipation of meeting your idol, like role model or someone you look up to, and it's hard to almost like separate your anticipation from the experience. Like you're biasing yourself, right? So take it with a grain of salt when I say this. It really does feel like something extraordinarily different than any other feeling in terms of just the energy, even if he's not saying anything at all. There's something about just the purity of knowing or feeling this individual just doesn't have the desires, the flaw of desires that I have, and that the world we operate in is programmed on. It just feels like you can feel the energy of something completely different.
And you actually met him like 2 weeks after even hearing he existed.
Yeah, I met him 2 weeks after.
That's right. You didn't have a whole lot of projection.
I really didn't have a lot of projection. Also, he's incredibly funny and like makes jokes. He called our common friend and I duds the first time, like as a joke, which was it was funny. Yeah, it's just like I don't know. It's hard. That's the best way I can describe it. No, yeah, I don't think he would get. I mean, he can get passionate, but not agitated. No.
Yeah, not just that. Like it's the clarity in which he's able to speak is, you can tell there is no filter of selfishness, agenda, motivation. He doesn't care if the words land, if they don't land, but because there's no filter, it's like the surfer that's on a 50-foot wave that knows that they're prepared for it, that can't die, like just so in flow at all times that, yeah, the answers to questions or the things that are said, they're said with such clarity that you're like, holy shit. Even at 98, with the beginnings of Parkinson's in a hospital bed, the clarity in which he speaks, yeah, it definitely is unlike anything I've experience. And to get to your practical question of how do they live, you could sum it up with this. They have a body, from our perspective. They have a body. They've got a mind. They've got an intellect. They even have preferences. And this philosophy is all about having no preferences. But it's not meant to be taken literally, to have no preferences, because the absolute never had any preferences. But the relative, the body in a hospital bed in front of you, that body actually prefers a very specific range of air pressure. And so you could actually sum it up pretty simply by saying there are preferences, but that person is not governed by them. So there are things that'll happen, but they're not governed by them. It's like, it's not my preference, okay. Versus how I operate. Or Reva. Yeah, Greg.
Real quick, there's if you aren't going to go to India in the next couple days, there is a guy on 3rd Street Promenade, a Swami in residence, from a cave in the Himalayas, and he's got this kind of the energy you're talking about, like he's not from here, very much so. I can't remember his name, but he wears orange. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it is otherworldly, and impossible to describe. And you're just, the whole time you kind of even try to make justifications like, well, how did that, well, maybe it was just because he was rested, like how he was so clear. Maybe it's because that's what you do if you were, in an ashram all the time. So you make a lot of like mental gymnastics, and then you just go back to the experience itself. And like, dude, I've never met anybody with that clarity on answers. Like our friend Ajay, who also had no idea who Swami was. He was already in India. I was like, you should come to this ashram with me in 2 weeks. He was like, all right, I'll do it. And Reva had just had a bit of a blow up in the professional life with a startup that he was building. And I was like, hey, now your calendar's free. You should come with me to India in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And he was like, next day, he's like, all right, I'll do it. And but yeah, he said to our friend, he said, Swami, what about the joy of having kids? And he says, why don't you do drugs? So fast. So fast. I guess he was probably 95 at that point. And his point was like, Ajay is like, yeah, but you can't just like spiritually study or reflect. And a lot of people in the ashram, there are a handful that are married, but they don't have kids, and a handful that have kids. Swami has kids, or has a daughter. But Ajay was just asking kind of so innocently, like, but isn't there joy? Like, there's got to be joy outside of ourselves. And Ajay's asking this at like, I think he was probably 29, 30, no kids, not even married. And just saying it because the other world tells you there's joy in having kids. Actually, a study that came out last week that said people that have kids are not, on average, happier than people without kids. I didn't look into the specifics of the study, so maybe it's just like the first 18 years or something. But it certainly, the headline was flying in the face of the cultural convention of like, have kids, it'll make you happier. Might not be the case, but don't quote me on it because I didn't click into it. But but it was so fast. And I, as Ajay said it, I'd gotten like 0.5 seconds after he said it, I was like, oh, how's he going to answer this? Because Swami has kids. And we all culturally completely agree. Kids are amazing. They make you happier. And he goes, why don't you do drugs? And do you remember that? You were there. You were in the room.
No, I believe you. It's exactly something you would say. But I kind of forgot that when you reminded. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And we all kind of were like,
that's
oh,
so
damn.
funny.
Like,
No,
and
I
it was just
remember
silent.
asking
That's the other thing. It's the clarity is so good that when he says something, the frickin' mic has dropped so fast that your head's spinning with the things that are said for weeks, years after. Okay, one more question. Yes? Great question. So the practices of this philosophy. There are perennial practices that are called Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. These 3 practices of this philosophy that take you to a place of either progressive detachment or to ultimate bliss and complete detachment. And that just means not needing outcomes, certain outcomes to happen. You're in fact more in your community. You're in fact more involved in your family and service to those around you. So you actually are quite woven into the people around you. It's not like you're just a renunciate outside of society. But those three words, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, means listening, reflecting, and then experiencing. Sometimes translated as meditation, but a very specific form of meditation. Listening, reflection, and experiencing. Meaning that you go from hearing these concepts. You go from maybe a talk like this, and you're like, I want to check out that book, or I want to listen to a few of those episodes. Then you hear the concepts, and then you'll hear me weave this into any of the episodes, that reflection, according to this philosophy, reflection is 100,000 times more powerful than listening. This quote within this philosophy is so powerful because it really orients us towards listening to something. Once it's like in ear, one ear, out the other. In 12 hours, it'll be like it never even happened, unless we reflect on it. So you jot it down. Maybe there's one principle that really spoke to you this morning. You jot it down. You spend 7, 8 days in the morning just reflecting on it, just journaling on it. Reflecting on it. What could that mean? Why did that speak to me? So why did I write that down? Where would that apply to my life? Reflection is 100,000 times more powerful than listening. Then Nididhyasana, experiencing, is 100,000 times more powerful than reflection. So reading about surfing, cool. A lot of people do that. A lot of people will watch a surfing video. Then reflecting on it, what would it be like to be on a wave that's 5 feet? It's just pushing you along. To have to balance yourself. Reflecting on it, it's even more, there's a lot more depth. Reflecting on what you're watching. What would that person be like in that scenario? That's got to be scary. Like, how would they overcome that fear? And that reflection is 100,000 times more powerful. But experiencing wave, that isn't just a difference in degree, it's a difference in kind altogether than watching a surf documentary or reading about it. And so those are the three perennial practices: listening, reflection, and then experiencing. The three daily practices are question everything, don't take anything for granted, and study, reflect each morning. Super simple. Question everything. It's as big or as little as you want. It could just be like, am I in the right job? Am I in the right relationship? Should I have a daily practice towards something that's a grounding wire towards the timeless? Question everything, including all the things the world tells you that you don't have, that you need to be complete. Question everything. Then don't take anything for granted, whether it's a promotion or a cancer diagnosis. Don't take anything for granted. Find gratitude. Gratitude and desire cannot coexist. Find a way to be grateful for all of the things that maybe younger you might not have been grateful for. Find a way to have the awareness and gratitude for all of the things that even younger you would have been grateful for, but wouldn't have taken the time to really reflect on how grateful one can be for all of these things that you might have. Question everything, don't take anything for granted, and then study, reflect daily. 10, 15 minutes, 2 pages of a book, whatever it is, 7:30 a.m., 5:30 a.m., but study, reflect daily, because if the thing that we're going towards is peace and prosperity, and the obstacle is selfish desire, another way of talking about it is there is this attachment to our desires, to outcomes, to egoistic pursuits. These attachments, they're a virus. There is no cure for the virus. You can only take a daily inoculation. But there's no cure of you double-click an Instagram post that really moved you, and then you're done with something that you really, that challenges you. There's no book that you finish reading, you're like, done. I'm done. I got it. It is a daily inoculation. That book will help you, those 2 pages. Maybe that inspiring thing on social media will help you for a few hours, maybe a day. But like a virus, you go 3, 4, 5 days without that daily inoculation. You're at lunch with a friend and they just got engaged, and you're like, oh, wait, what? Oh, I'm so happy about that. Why is this happening for me? Or they get a promotion, or I was at a dinner last night, and a friend announced he sold his company. And I was like, dude, oh, hell yeah. First thought was literally like, dude, this is awesome for all of us. I literally was like, we're all retiring. And then my next thought was like, man, really? He sold that company. Really? Interesting. He's only 30? And I was like just watching and observing like, oh, wow, the virus can get you. And that's 13 years of study every single day. And so, it's recognizing that it's a daily study reflection is really powerful. That's a great question to end on. Thank you all for coming this Friday morning. We're up here for an extra few minutes, so feel free to come up and say hello and then come back every first Friday. Oh, and then also, my wife is, if you want a copy of one of these books, they are $30, and it's just what the price is on Amazon. And you can come up to Cheney, she'll raise her hand right now, and you can buy one from her. All right, thank you, buddy. Thanks, y'all.